Now, our next guest is no stranger to our show here, but is also quite the expert when it comes to the job search from a candidate perspective, from a company consulting perspective. And this first conversation is going to be all about the company side of things. So, Bill, how are you this morning?
I am well, Kimberly, and yourself?
I'm excellent. It's always great to chat with you. So I'm very excited about this conversation because we're often talking about, deleting recruiting from HR and the sales piece of it, and then we're also talking about the candidate strategy and how to properly look for a job. But this conversation is so interesting because we're talking about how do recruiters set proper recruiting goals to make sure that they are basically sticking up to the standards for their internal business partners.
Sounds good. So when you think about talent attraction, what you're trying to do is you're trying to attract the best candidates to your company. And too often, human resources does not understand that they are in a sales process, and they will then measure the wrong activities. For instance, is receiving 400 resumes for a position better than receiving 3 that are on target? The answer is no. And the reason that they're receiving those 400 responses is probably because the job description's poorly written and people really think, well, maybe I can do that job. I'm not sure exactly what it is. So that's the reason why we're talking about proper goal setting for the recruiters.
It's so true. Pinpointed recruiting is often the better result and a better use of your time. So you have an acronym that I've noticed about recruiting and setting recruiting goals. So tell me all about it.
It's funny, Kimberly. I set my goals to hitchhike all the way from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in 5 days in 1969 using this acronym. So I've had it for a long time, and the acronym is SCAMPS, SCAMPS. And so how do recruiters set proper goals for recruiting? Just follow the acronym. S is set a specific goal with a strategy to achieve that goal. For instance, set a goal to talk to 10 different candidates per day for a specific position. And you know what? Maybe those candidates don't even know that they're a candidate yet. You have to recruit them. C is the goal needs to be challenging. And here's the problem with your brain. If it's not a challenging goal, your brain goes, that's boring. I'm not interested. So it's got to be a challenging goal. The A is it has to be attainable. Like I said, your brain's smart. And if it's not attainable, it's going to go, I'm not wasting my time doing that. So it has to be attainable. And it needs to be measurable. So that's the reason why I gave the example of calling 10 candidates for one specific position per day being your goal. Is it challenging? Yes, because you're not going to make 10 phone calls and get 10 people. So you'll have to keep going and making those calls until you get the right person. And then measure the results too, because maybe you may have to change your pitch that you're making to those candidates, and you can just make those adjustments on the run. It needs to be public. And the reason it needs to be public is because the public will help you and it will keep you on target and accountable. The other thing is you make these calls to people within your network. They may not be in the same industry, they may not be in the same field, but possibly their spouse is, possibly one of their best friends or a family member is. You never know where you're going to get those results from your networking. And that's making it public. And then finally, set a specific end date. So for me, the 2 S's are the bungee cord that ties scamps together. And once you have that specific end date, now you can measure your activity versus the goal that you set.
I love that. So strategy and the result, and you kind of fill in the gaps in between, and that's what the beauty of LinkedIn, and you can see people commenting, or somebody that's not in their network. So lots of good strategy there as well. So let's talk about hiring manager goals. So what are they, and specifically, how does that go hand in hand with the recruiter?
Well, Kimberly, you have an advantage that few people who interview me have, and that is you are a recruiter also. and and so this will resonate with you. Too often, managers put off responding to resumes, and the best candidates have short shelf lives. So it's important that within 24 hours, they get back to you about a person's candidacy based on the resume they saw. And probably, in my case, I do a phone screen of every candidate I introduce to a manager. And so the manager not only has the resume in front of them, but they have my phone screen. So they've got a lot of information about that person. And so it's important for them to get back to me within 24 hours to let me know, am I interested or not? And if not, why not?
That's exactly right. I think for me, and now that we're talking about what else I've done in my professional work history, I tend to respond to the hiring managers that are the most responsive, and that's where my focus is going to go, because they're motivated and they're engaged and they're interested. So that kind of comes down to company goals. Let's talk about the company goals and what are their primary goals with getting new candidates and new employees onto their payroll.
The company goals are both simple in description and difficult to maybe do. I've been recruiting for over 40 years, and the majority of managers that I have recruited for don't know how to effectively interview. And if you don't know how to effectively interview, you're going to hire the wrong person. And what I hear so many times, and I've heard it enough times, I even have a saying that I respond. And that is, well, this candidate feels good in my gut. And my response is, guts are really good for storing and processing food. Not so good for selecting the right candidate. So it's
not good for feelings.
Right. And so it's important for the company to spend some time and have those managers taught how to properly and effectively interview, and then do that several times, kind of take a Dale Carnegie approach, do it several times through a year, just review and see how they're doing versus what they were doing before. And then the other goal for the company is to track consistently the manager's hires. And that'll give you a sense of how well they're interviewing, number one. But, find out, look at the candidates who were hired and how did they respond in the work world? Did they move the position up to another level? Did they just keep it at the same level, or worse, did they fail?
It's very, very important. And, Bill, we appreciate your insight, especially because you are a leading attraction consultant in all across the board in the U.S. You've worked nationally, and so very impressive work. This is great conversation because usually we have the conversation from the job search perspective. So, we've got hiring managers that are watching and listening, so this is a great way for them to reevaluate their business. We appreciate your insight and all that you do.
And there's one more thing that's really important.
Sure.
Remember, the best candidates are attracted to companies with the best employees. That means tracking how the manager's hires are doing is very important.
That's 100% correct. People stay with managers and they stay with people, not necessarily because of who the company is. So that couldn't be more spot on, Bill. We appreciate your insight there.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, well, stay tuned. We'll be back with more. And Bill Humbert, always a pleasure to speak with you.
It's been great, Kimberly. Thank you.
We'll be right back after this quick break.